Welcome back, listener. How are you? I'm glad you had a good week. Welcome back to Aaron's Opinion. This is Aaron Richmond, the host of the Aaron's Opinion podcast, a podcast where we talk about critical issues in the blindness community. Aaron's Opinion can be found almost anywhere you get a podcast, from Apple to Spotify to Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon. We're almost everywhere. And I do want to say before we get going that this episode of Aaron's Opinion is copywritten by Aaron Richmond and Aaron's Opinion. Thank you very much. Today we are speaking with someone who I have been actually in contact with this person for over a month. They're on the other side of the pond from wherever I am. We're speaking today with John Perry. And basically, I'm going to start out by saying that the focus or the idea that I would like John Perry to expand upon in our conversation today is the idea that you can find and forge your own path. And that John Perry has worked for over 30 years in the, basically, as we would say here in the States, in the disability and advocacy community. He helps people. He does a lot of work, but basically he helps people who have either a disability or a health problem to find employment and inclusion in society. And I think that's all great. He joins us from, I believe, Liverpool, England. How are you?
Well, actually, I'm originally from Liverpool, but I now live in St Helens, Merseyside, but it's just up the road from Liverpool, so not far.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm fine, thank you, yes.
Very.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, of course. So let's go back 30 years. How did you get into this whole, where did this whole idea of you starting this organization that helps people with disabilities there in England, where did this idea come from? Maybe if you could start by giving us a history, that would be good.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you a potted history. If I'm saying too much or going on too much, feel free to tell me. But essentially, I went to what we would call special school in Liverpool for an organisation called St Vincent's School for the Blind. And I was working in administration and the print department and various other things in my early part of my life. And I trained as a telephonist. But I also retrained as what we would call a counsellor over here. I don't know if they have the same term in America, but supporting both non-disabled and disabled people with their lives. And I guess from my own personal experience, I wanted to kind of support disabled people to achieve their own personal and professional goals. And I have what I would describe as a sort of a person-centered approach to that. So it's not about what I or professionals want for disabled people, but it's about what they want. And I'm here to kind of support and facilitate that. Now, the other side of that was I'd been in paid employment for a number of years, and also self-employment, and also did voluntary work as well. From my own perspective, I did enjoy my time in employment, but I think it suits me personally to be self-employed. And so that was my chosen path, if you like. And as I say, I did some voluntary work. So I think from my perspective, the idea, and also I can retain some independence about how I want to do things, how I want to live my life, and all of those sort of things. And also work with the individuals and organisations that I feel, fit my philosophy or are trying to achieve similar things as well. Obviously, I'd be lying to you if I said, I've still got to pay myself a wage, and some of the work we've done is that we kind of worked on a freelance basis. We obtain grants to deliver support free of charge in some cases and stuff like that. And so the work I've done has been anything from counselling to advocacy to training people in the use of computers, and also life coaching and all of those sort of things. And I've also tried to obtain qualifications that would enable me to support the individuals that I wanted to work with. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
All of that makes sense, and all of that is excellent. I completely understand. So, by the way, for you at home, listener, you guys know who I am, but John Perry doesn't know me at all. As I said, to introduce myself, I'm someone who's 29 years old. And I did live in England, by the way, for 3 months. I did a study abroad program at the University of East Anglia. So I love England. It's a
Right.
wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that, as you've noted and as you've noticed, that yes, self-employment seems to be a very good option for blind people. At least that's my opinion. That's where my life has gone. I studied in university. I studied international affairs or international studies, and then from there I needed to kind of form my make my own way in life. So I got into some online teaching, which is my day job, as we would say. And then about a year ago, I got into podcasting because I feel that there needs to be a strong podcast and strong podcasts for people who are blind around the world, where someone who's blind can just come up to me and say, "Hey, Aaron, I have a story that your audience needs to hear. Are you ready to listen to everything I have to say?" And I would say, "Sure, come to my podcast." But I think what you've said is all really good. So let's put things in.
Can I
Sure.
just make a comment
Of course.
about if I'm honest with you, I've only recently just got into podcasting, and so Focus has launched its own podcast as well. But the other thing I've recently got involved in is like community radio. So I do a program around equality and diversity issues, and we've in the past, I've also edited and owned online newspapers around equality and diversity. So I guess in a way, we're singing from similar hymn sheets in a way, kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, great, excellent, excellent. So let's put things into perspective. I mean, a lot of times, people talk about counseling, talk about all of these things, but let's give our listeners, let's give the audience a little bit more of a concrete example. So can you talk about maybe an interesting experience or an interesting example of counseling work that you have done in the past, where you can kind of paint a picture for the listener so they can understand?
Yeah, well, I would say my background has been in sort of what I would describe as personal and vocational counselling. So I've helped people with relationship difficulties, I've helped people with employment issues and things like that. And to pick up an earlier point that you said to me, like the organisations where I've been supporting disabled people, it's all been about trying to help them develop the path that they want. So I think sometimes we can be a bit too prescriptive with disabled people and tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing, denying them opportunities for the, not necessarily for bad reasons or anything like that, but not necessarily like allowing them to like kind of realize their own ambitions and opportunities. And of course, there's good examples of that and there's bad examples of that. But my whole kind of sense is that if I can help people start up a business, get into employment, realize their own potential and all of those sort of things, I personally have been trained in sort of person-centered and cognitive behavioral counselling and rational emotive therapy type stuff. But what I also say is, for me, it's about having the empathy and the listening skills to kind of help them path of their choosing, not my choosing, if that makes sense. And, whilst I might use different theoretical approaches, ultimately, if I've helped them achieve their objective, it doesn't really matter how we get them there, as long as we get them there, and that's the path that they want to take. The big thing for me is that I think we can put barriers in our own way as individuals, as disabled people, but I think society does to a certain extent, and to a certain extent, maybe sometimes families for the right reasons might do that, but equally professionals might do that for, equally what they might consider to be right reasons. But I think we've got to allow people to breathe and find their own space and do their own thing. Obviously, taking into account that people might need support.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's you're absolutely correct. Yeah. So, what have been? I mean, I think that although I understand everything you're saying, I think that a lot of my listeners would like to know maybe an interesting story of someone who came to you, someone that you helped along the way. Obviously, you can change the name and change a lot and change the details, but if you could paint a picture of someone who came and had an idea that you helped them, maybe that they had a dream that you helped to come true. Maybe you can talk about that.
Okay, well, I've got one particular lady who has autism, and she was basically working in the care industry and lost her way a little bit in the care industry. And the first time she ever came through my door, she was at a really low ebb and didn't know what path to take and didn't know really where she wanted to go. But she did have a little idea that she wanted to become self-employed and things like that. Now, it has taken a while, but we started it off. We started it off setting it up, selling sweets and different products and things like that. She did card making and things like that. So she's gone on to do set up her own business now, selling sweets, but also cleaning products. You know, with the current pandemic at the moment and things like that, there's quite a demand for cleaning products in around where I live and where she lives and things like that at the moment. So he set up a little thing kind of doing that as well. And I think also I've helped people go into coaching who wanted to go into football coaching for Liverpool and Everton, helping disabled people develop their own skills in football. But he also wanted to kind of achieve his own coaching and stuff like that. And I've also helped engineers who kind of wanted to go into self-employment and kind of needed, we call it access to work support over here. I don't know what it might be called in the States, but it's whereby the government have a scheme whereby they'll provide equipment and practical support to support the needs of disabled people and blind people to be employed and self-employed. So, for example, I use JAWS as a screen reader, and that was paid for through access to work. And so in the particular case I was talking about with the guy who's an engineer and stuff, we arranged for him to get like a support worker to help him with certain aspects of his job. With the particular lady I'm talking about now, a lot of it is about the lady with autism. A lot of it is about helping her to support her in running a day-to-day business stuff, to manage a day-to-day business stuff. But some of it's about motivational stuff and getting her to believe in that she's capable and doing things like that. So I guess there's a range of aspects, really. I mean, I also remember a guy came into the room one day and he said, do you know what, I've been in employment for 30 years or something like that. And he said, I'd love to become a self-employed author. And he left work and he thought he'd never be able to become a self-employed author, but we got him into things like that as well. So I think for me, what I guess I'm trying to get across is it's about what the person wants, and then we kind of help them achieve that. And then the other aspect of my work is, so we work with employers to make sure that blind and disabled people are supported into work, but whilst they're in work, make sure that they have all the right equipment, the right support, and that the employer, understands their legal obligations and things like that. So some of the times I have to kind of work with the employer, but sometimes I have to work with the unions, the employer, and sometimes tribunals to help people understand that obviously blind people and visually impaired people and disabled people have rights, and here's how we can address them. So it's a range of things. And I think the beauty about what I do is that no one day is the same. So we can, and then the other side of my work is that over in the UK, we have quite a useful welfare system that supports disabled people with benefits and grants and stuff like that. So part of the aspect of my work is to help people understand the right benefits that they can obtain to either help them remain in work and stay in work, or if they become unemployed or unemployed, support them in that side of things as well. So it's a range of things I think that we get involved with,
Really excellent. And for viewers from the Americas or maybe my side of the pond, sweets means candy. So there goes that question in the chat. What are sweets? Sweets is candy.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. I didn't think about that. Yes.
Yeah, I thought of it. I thought of it. Yeah, because I lived in England and English people call candy sweets. Yeah.
You did give me a bit of an American lesson on what to say before we came on air, and to say candy.
The other one that I love, I love this one. When I was living in Norwich, I went to a grooming shop to get a haircut one day, and the barber tells me, "Hey, Aaron, I'm glad you don't have any nits." And then he combs my hair again. Nits? What on earth are nits? I thought. And then I said, "Oh, do you mean lice?" And then, so yeah, the British word for lice is nits, they call them there. And then the other famous one that Americans have never heard of is lorry. Well, if you're an American and you're living in England, What on earth is a lorry? Took me a couple weeks to figure out that lorry is truck in
That's
American
it.
English.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some famous ones.
Yeah.
But yes, in England you can sell